Welcome to all. Development, especially the human development, is a process which we can describe it as a lifespan process. And in this lifespan process, we can see that the child development can be viewed in different perspectives. Hence, today's topic, it is dealing with the biological perspective of child development. And in this session, we are going to discuss the meaning of biological perspective to differentiate the two viewpoints of biological perspective, that is attachment viewpoint and maturational viewpoint. What do we mean by child development? When we think of child development, we can state that the changes that occur in a child in different domains. What are the domains? That is physical domain, social domain, emotional domain. So in different domains, what type of changes are occurring? That is the domains of or the dimensions of child development. And in this aspect, we can discuss the different perspective which can be categorized as biological perspective, cognitive perspective, lifespan perspective. So there are different bioecological perspective of child development. And when we look at the biological perspective, what is the most important thing? That is biological perspective in child development. It first emerged in the beginning of 20th century, where it got motivation from Charles Darwin's idea regarding evolution. So here the biological perspective on child development, it states that children's cognitive abilities, motor functions, personality and physical traits, it is developing in accordance with their biological design. So here, when we look at the founding father of this perspective, that is G. Stanley Hall, he stated that the child development can be viewed in terms of biological design. So in the development of psychology, we can see that always physiology plays a major role, and biology and physiology combining together, we can call it as biological psychology. Sometimes it may be termed as biopsychology or physiology psychology due to the interaction or the emphasis on the physical and biological basis of behavior. So what is important in the biological perspective, we can see that the influence of genes, how the genes is influencing and how it promotes or it supports the development of a child. And when we think of this biological perspective, the role of nature and nurture is coming into existence. So the nature, it denotes the genetical aspects, whereas the nurture, the environment is influencing a lot. So the environment where the child is developing is important and the genes is also important. While coming to this perspective, we can state that the two important viewpoints, that is maturation viewpoint by Arnold Jessel and the attachment viewpoint by John Bowley and Mary Ainsworth. So first let me see what do we mean by this maturation viewpoint. So this viewpoint, as I have already stated, it was put forward by Arnold Jessel, a psychologist as well as a pediatrician, who developed this theory in the field of child development. And according to this theory, personalities of children are not caused by their environment but by their genes. So the emphasis is upon the genetic influences instead of the environment. That's why it is known as the biological perspective. So what is important here is that the child develops biologically in a predetermined order from within, unfolding in fixed, predictable sequences or stages. And when we look at these stages, we can see that each child has his or her unique rate or pace. And it is the child development, it is the product of environment, but playing a larger role are genes and human nature. So when we look at this theory, we can see that the maturation viewpoint, as stated by Arnold Jessel, stating that the child is undergoing different stages, and we can see there is a sequence of stages of development. That first, how the physical development is taking place. So what type of changes is happening physically, what type of changes is happening emotionally, what type of changes is happening cognitively. So all these things can be taken into account. So how the development is taking place in different paces. Here the sequence will be the same, but the attainment of that type of development, it takes time. So pace play a major role in development. Now when we come to this maturational viewpoint, how this viewpoint is interrelated with the educational implications of this maturation viewpoint. So here we can see that the role of maturation and learning helps the parent or the teacher to know what and when to begin training. So here the main important aspect is maturation and learning. That's the reason why we have kept the age for the foundational stage. What is the age for beginning of schooling? That depends upon the maturation of the child, whether the child is ready to go to school. So here, what and when to begin training or send to school, it's an important thing. And if the child is not old or mature enough to gain by teaching, then the child is unable to learn. So whatever way we are trying to experience or train the child, it will never happen. And we can see that in some days, in order to attain a degree or entering into a job at an early age, there is a tendency to send children early in school in earlier years. Now, there is a fixed years so that this can be avoided. So what is important is that instead of sending children to school immediately, that so that they will enter school, they will become disciplined. In that way, the perception of parents. But instead of that, what is important, if the child is ready to learn, or what and when the child can be sent to school, whether the child is mature enough to go to school, it should be taken into account. Coming to the learning, the second important implication, learning should begin when the child is ready to learn. And if the child is ready to learn, and if he is not given guidance or training, then he is likely to lose interest. So here, what is important? The readiness of the child to learn. That determines the maturation and not the age. So when the child is ready to learn, send the child to school. It's not upon the age limit. But what is happening? We are giving importance to the age limit. Coming to the next aspect, that is the attachment viewpoint. There the term itself denotes that there is an attachment between the infant and the caregiver or the mother. So here this viewpoint, it is focused on the relationships and bonds between people, particularly long-term relationships, including those between a parent and a child and life partners. So here this theory, it was put forward by John Bowlby. He described attachment as a lasting psychological connectedness between human beings. So here he stated that he was interested in understanding the separation anxiety and distress that children experience when separated from primary caregivers. What John Bowlby did is that he developed an episode which is known as the strange episode. The stranger episode, where it denotes the separation anxiety, and while reunion the joyfulness is coming. So in that way the 8 episodes he has developed. When the child is secure or feels secure in bonding with the immediate caregiver, when the infant feels fearful, or when it has the separation anxiety, in that way some 8 episodes in the stranger episodes John Bowlby has developed. So this attachment theory, when we look at the theory, the basis of the interaction with the caregiver, infants build up expectation about relationships in the form of internal working models. So here, this internal working models is important to process social relationships. What does this internal working models means? We know that the term itself denotes that it is working internally. So it is working in the cognitive level. So the cognitive representations develop within the child about himself or herself and others. That is the internal working model. How the child is developing the cognitive representations within himself or herself about some particular situations. So here, what is important is securely attached infants will form internal working models reflecting their love-seeking bond towards others. So secure attachment is theorized to be an important foundation for psychological development later in childhood, adolescence and adulthood. So what is important, as I stated earlier in the 8th episode of the stranger episode, there we can see the secure attachment, the unsecure attachment, the fear, the separation anxiety, all the things we can see when the separation anxiety is developing when the caregiver left a particular room, sending the child under the custody of a strange person where the child doesn't know. So that times the separation anxiety is coming. So the secure attachment will come when the mother enters the room and the child becomes happy, stop crying, so that the bonding is building upon. So what is important from this theory is that from the childhood stage, the needs of the infant should be met immediately. Instead of making the infants to cry for a long time, or to disturb, or not to give something, or to show some adamant nature of the parent that gives a negative impact upon the child. So that at the childhood level or at the infant stage itself, while the caregivers or the mother or the parents who are taking care of the child, they should develop a secure attachment, that is a positive relationship. That is very important in any context. So such a child who got a secure attachment or a positive relationship, they will always develop a positive or healthy environment, and they will develop a secure attachment while dealing with others. And we know that while they become or enter in the later childhood or adulthood stage, we can see some people who will not trust others. It shows that their childhood life, they got some kind of not a secure attachment. So that is an important thing there we can see. So attachment theory, in that John Bowlby, he stated he believed that attachment was categorized by clear behavioral and motivational patterns. And later on, Mary Ainsworth also joined with him and did a lot of experiment on this attachment theory. So when children are frightened, they will seek proximity from their primary caregivers in order to receive both comfort and care. So attachment is an emotional bond with another person. So here, Bowlby believed that the earliest bonds formed by children with their caregivers have a tremendous impact that continues throughout life. So this type of bond is continuing throughout life. So he suggested that attachment also serves to keep the infant close to the mother, thus improving the child's chances of survival. So the survival of the child is increasing. So from the childhood stage, it is very much important to give a positive environment or to develop a positive relationship with the child. And Bowlby viewed attachment as a product of evolutionary process. So unlike the behaviorist theories, Bowlby and others propose that children are born with an innate drive to form attachment with the caregivers. So here, the most important prominent figure for the child in terms of proximity is the immediate caregiver. It may be an parent, mother or father, or any other person who is taking care of the child. So here, what is responsible for the successful attachment? So what is responsible here is the behaviorist suggests that it was food that led to forming this attachment behavior. That is the opinion of the behaviorist. While the attachment viewpoint who developed this viewpoint, that is Bowlby, he stated that instead of food, nurturance and responsiveness were the primary factors that lead to attachment. As I stated earlier, there are different nurturing style of parents, or parenting styles are different. So how parents are nurturing the child, that is an important thing. Whether when a child is crying, or the mother may be in the kitchen, whether she is going and checking the child, that is an important thing. So what is important? How the nurturing setup is and how the responsiveness of the caregiver. When there is crying, whether the crying is resolved, what the child needs, whether out of hunger or out of thirst. So whether the need is resolved by the mother, that is an important thing. Whether the response is immediate or after some time the response is resolved. So this shows the nature of attachment the child is developing with the parents. What are the educational implications of attachment viewpoint? When we think of this attachment viewpoint, we can see that it influences school success through two routes. That is indirectly through attachment to parents and directly through attachment to teachers and schools. What does it mean that these two routes? We can see that the first school is the home. Second home is the school. So what is important is that in the home environment, those children who are cared by parents for their food, for their studies and for the growth, such children are disciplined while they come to school and they don't have any psychosocial problems. Their problems are very less. It can be resolved. Whereas we can see that in some school situation, there are cases where teachers feel very difficult to manage some children or to manage some behavioral problems of children. They don't know how to sit in a classroom or how to work silently. So this all shows that whether the children got the secure attachment in their infant stage, or whether the attachment between the parent and the child is in a positive way or in a negative way. This is an important aspect. Coming to the nurturing adult attachments, provide children with protective, safe and secure basis from which to explore and engage with others. So what is important that the provision of providing safe and secure environment is very much important, and such type of environment. That's why we are telling that always create the classroom environment in a positive way. So early caregiving has a long-lasting impact on development, the ability to learn, capacity to regulate emotions and form satisfying relationships. It is very important. And attachment is crucial to children's psychological welfare and forms the basis of personality development and socialization. So, when we look at the personality types, we can see there are different types of, or the traits of personality types, the introvert, the extrovert, so the ambivert. So, these all things we can see based on the nurturing setup and the responsiveness of the parents, which are very important while dealing with this attachment and the development of personality. And the type of socialization, where we can see the micro-socializing agency is the home, and that socialization is in a positive way, then it is okay. So here the secure attachment is very much important. The biological function of attachment is survival. The psychological function is to gain security. So what is important here, in case when we think in biological terms, the survival is the most important thing. Whereas psychologically we will tell that the safe and secure environment is the basis. So this we can see that the biological perspective, it states that the genes, it matters a lot, not the environment. But when we look at the two viewpoints, the maturation viewpoint and the attachment viewpoint, how do they differ? And some kind of risk factors affecting the quality of attachment between the child and the parent. When we think of that, we can see that the first one, the immediate need of the child, that is hunger. If it is a poverty, if there exists poverty in a family, such families could not meet the hunger of the child. The parental mental health difficulties, violence or other forms of abuse, alcohol, drug taking during pregnancy, multiple home and school placements, premature birth and abandonment. So all these factors affect negatively in the growth of the child. We know that poverty, that it's an important thing where the need, drive for hunger should be met with food. And the caregiver's mental health and the well-being of the caregivers is an important thing. That is the psychosocial element. Then if there exists violence in the household matters, there we can see that such children will have fear, that instead of having a secure attachment, they will have insecure attachment with the parents. Then the alcohol taking, the drug addiction of the pregnant mother, it will adversely affect the child. Then when there is placement, different types of placements and premature birth and abandonment, it really affects the growth of the child. So here, and some we can see that in biological perspective, the genes played a major role, where this perspective can be divided into two: attachment viewpoint and maturation viewpoint. And the maturation viewpoint stated that when the child is ready to learn, send the child to school. And in the attachment viewpoint, the environment that we are giving in the giving at home, it should be a secure environment where the children's needs was immediately responded, and the nurture and setup should be positive in nature. Thank you.